Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Software Success. Oh, I see a little something extra there. So, I am Ashley Jones, and I'm your host for Software Success. And if you haven't been here before, this is where we talk about all things dime embroidery software. I love to share my love of software with all of you so that you get the most out of your embroidery software. It's so important to be able to use the features that you need. You don't have to use all of them, but to be able to use the features that you need. And it really does help you in your embroidery studio. So I love sharing what I do with my software. And I love seeing what all of you do with yours too. So we'll give just a few minutes for everyone to pop in. As always, we've got lots of information for you today. So we don't want to waste too much time here. So let's just say hi to some people popping in before we get started. So Carolyn Morrow, thanks for being here from Crossville, Tennessee. Donna, thanks for being here from North Idaho. Renee, Lockport, New York, thanks for being here. Kelly, hey Kelly, how are you from Alabama? And Catherine Keller from Austin, Texas. Marianne, thanks for being here. Marianne, always good to see you as well. Pamela, Sharon from Ohio, Linda Johnson, thanks for being here. Linda Johnston is always doing some fun stuff with her software, I know. Creative Appliques, thanks for being here. Dawn, always good to see you as well. Jan Jeffers, thanks for being here. Cindy Clark, nice to see you from South Dakota. Lots of people joining in, and I'm starting to recognize, I've been recognizing a lot of your names, and so I know that there's lots of you using your software to its fullest, and I always love seeing you guys come here to learn more. So you guys know Reen from Embroidery Gardens, thanks for being here. Reen. Harriet Ann Palmer, thanks for being here as well. She's my neighbor to the north there. Mickey Smith, good to see you. Bet, good to see you. Diane Johnson, Kathy. Oh my goodness, we got a really nice crowd here today. Anne, nice to have you here. Alice, good to have you. Lori. Wow, lots of people joining. So maybe this was a topic that really sparked some interest. So today we are going to be talking about splitting jumbo embroidery designs. Now, I'm going to do this kind of in two different ways. So we're going to talk about taking a design that you don't really have the ability to separate into two hoopings, and how we would split that. And then also, if you don't have this particular tool and say you've particularly arranged your design so that you can do it in multiple hoopings, I'm going to talk about how you can create your design into multiple hoopings and how to get it lined up. So splitting a large design is the way that we would do it, like if you've got fill stitches down the center without having to digitize each separate segment. And we've got a tool that does that, so we'll talk about that. But there's also ways of separating parts and pieces of a design. Like, let's say you've got text and you can easily divide it, like between letters or between words, to fit it in a smaller hoop is another way that we'll do that. And so we'll talk about different ways that you can do that in your software. And I even, which I don't normally show, but I am going to show you the realigning process. Like under my camera, I've pre-stitched a couple of things to show you. So normally on Software Success, we are all about the software segment of it, but I know that splitting and aligning designs is something that is a bit of a mystery. So I did pre-stitch a couple of things just to kind of help you understand the way that we line up the design. So this episode is actually another viewer request. So I've got lots of requests for topics. So I'm pulling from those topics when I can and using those topics to share with all of you. Because if one person's asking, I figure there are probably multiple people that want to know how to do some of these things. So, and this was definitely one of them. So splitting a design or working with jumbo design. So let's get started in how we can accomplish this. So I'm going to head over to my embroidery software. And I've got a couple of designs that I've picked out. This is one of them that I'm going to use for an example. And this is a really large design here. And you may not have a hoop that's this large, or maybe you want to enlarge a design and you don't have a hoop that's this large. So here you can see if I draw my, use my guidelines here just to show you. This design is an 8 by 12. Actually, it's almost 13 inches. So 8 1/4 by nearly 13 inches. And so if you don't have a hoop that large, it would really be ideal if you could stitch this in multiple hoopings, right? And get all of that lined back up. So I'm going to show you the split tool and how we use this, but I also want to show you these placement marks. So the placement marks built into quite a few of our dime software can also help you line up a design. So let's start with the placement marks. And then I think this will help us understand rehooping and lining up your design. So let's start a new workspace here. And then I'm going to just create a quick design here. And so this is a really great example of editing this little floral border design here. So I'm going to show you some basic editing here so you'll get a little extra snippet with this placement. But I just want one of these flowers. And so I'm going to ungroup this. So anytime we want to edit a design, we ungroup it so that we can get to the individual pieces. And I really just want this one flower here. So I can either copy it and put that onto a new workspace, or I could eliminate the parts of the design that I don't want and just be left with this element. Okay, so this I'm going to quickly just make a repeatable pattern here. So with our repeat tool, the repeat tool allows me to make a lot of copies in a short amount of time. And so I'm just going to tell it, I just answer these questions here. I'm going to do, say, 7 repeats to high. And this is actually a fairly small design. So even right now, this is only 4 inches tall. Or I'm sorry, almost 4 inches tall, 3.5 inch wide, and then 2 inches tall, because this is a really small little flower. And then I'm just going to use some of these built-in features here in the repeat tool to make it look a little bit different. Okay, so you can read all these different options and they all do different things. So this one here, it mirrors every other option. Now this is symmetrical, so you don't notice it as much. The flip every other one is going to mirror image it top to bottom. And I think that's pretty cute. And then here we've got offset every other one horizontally. So you can see that it puts a gap between every other. And so I'm going to uncheck that so we can do the every other vertically. And you can see that it's doing it between these rows because I only have 2 rows. And then here's offset every other row. And then I have offset every other column. And so if I uncheck this, you can see how we've got this look here. And just by checking the offset every other column, you can see how it kind of adjusts that. So I love the repeat tool. It's a way that you can make a bunch of copies, make really cool borders. And that's I'm using this example because borders are something that we use in a multi-hooping situation that we have to line up each time we rehoop. Okay, so I'm going to use this as my border and click OK. And let's say that we wanted to put this at, like maybe it's along the top of a sheet or around the band of a pillowcase. Maybe it's at the hem of a little girl's dress or something like that. We need to repeat this over and over and over. And so here, and actually I'm going to undo because I want to show you something here before that one was a little more complicated. Let's do that again. So I'm going to do 2. And then let's do 7 repeats, I think. And so I'm going to check each one of these again. And I actually want 6 repeats. And the reason I'm doing this is because I wanted, see how if we repeat this one, it would be right side up over here. I'm going to show you how to handle the other situation, but I wanted this one to be the easiest way first. So let's go to this one. So I've got 6 repeats and then 2 rows, and I've adjusted these options here. Click OK. Okay, so now when we do a repeatable design, like this design actually would fit in a 4x4 hoop. So if even if you have a small hoop for your embroidery machine, or maybe you like working with a small hoop because you find it easier to manage, then you can do this type of procedure. So I'm going to use these placement marks here. So the placement marks, they're actually in quite a few of our dime software. And I can actually check or mark the ones that I want to use, okay? And if I'm gonna repeat this border on the left and the right, then I'm gonna use the marks on the left and the right. If I was gonna repeat this top to bottom, I would use the marks across the top and the bottom, and we're gonna do one of each, okay? So I'm gonna say, okay, here. And these are actually basting stitches. So once you stitch the design, you would then remove these marks. They are just to help you line them up. Okay. And so the way that these work are you would stitch this entire design to start with. And then when you rehoop, I'm going to copy and paste this just so we can see. When you rehoop, your goal is to line up this next design, these marks, with these marks that are already stitched like this right here. And you can see by doing that, your design, if I hide all of the black marks here, wherever my other black ones are, here we go, then you can see how that perfectly lines up with that gap in between my flowers there. So I love to show this example because this one it's really important that you get that spacing right for it to look correct. And so now I'm going to unhide my placement marks here. And let's talk about the stitching process of these placement marks. So I'm going to undo and just get rid of that one, okay? And so here's the other thing that I like to change with these placement marks. So when this stitches, it's basically gonna stitch the first, the placement marks first, and then it's gonna stitch the design. Well, first of all, we could color sort here so that it stitches all together. So I'm gonna choose edit and resequence by color. That'll put all my like colors together. And so now you can see that it's gonna stitch the black and then all of my flowers, okay? So after you do that, excuse me, what I really like to happen here is this set of placement marks, I like them to stitch separately than these because you'll see why here in just a minute. So I usually select the ones that are at the end and I move them to stitch last. Okay. So then I can just click to make those stitch move to the front. And that's going to stitch last. So now if we watch the stitch out, and then you'll see why here in just a second. So I get that first set of placement marks, I'm going to stitch my design, and then it's going to stitch the last set of placement marks, okay? So now, after we have stitched this, we need to rehoop our design and line up those black marks, okay? So here's an easy way to do it. So now I'm going to copy and paste this again, copy, paste, and then move this here. So now the next thing that's going to stitch are just the black placement marks. I stitch those onto my stabilizer, and then I can easily line up this last mark here with the next one. Okay, so then this would look like this. So I would stitch one complete design, okay, and my placement marks. And then I would take that out of the hoop. I'm trying to get it right at the end. Okay. So after the placement marks, let's just do it like this. So I'm going to hide everything, hide all. Okay. And so I would stitch one complete design and these here. And I still didn't get it. So I turned them off instead of clicking it to be separate. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, so then now I would stitch one complete design, okay? And then I would take that out of the hoop, okay? So then I'm basically starting over with nothing in the hoop, okay? And then the next thing that I want to do is stitch just these placement marks. And I'm going to align those with the ones that I already have stitched. And then when I stitch the rest of my design, it's going to line up perfectly. Okay. So now that's the process. And then I'll show you under my camera because I think it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay. So these placement marks can help you when you're doing multi hoopings. Okay. So I'm just going to turn everything back on here, right mouse click. I've got a view option and I can show and hide all that's in my sequence view. And that's just, I use that all the time when I'm selecting things and whatnot. Okay. So now let's do something a little bit different. You can see how these line up perfectly. Now I'm going to start a new workspace here and let's do an example where we need the space in between them. Okay. So now I'm going to use a buttonhole for this example. So in Perfect Embroidery Pro and in the hoop, we have built-in buttonholes, okay, that I can select from. And I'm going to just use this one here. If you've ever needed to do buttonholes, like say for a placket, or maybe you're doing a valance, something like that, built-in buttonholes are a really awesome way to do that in software. And I can use my repeat tool the same way. Okay. And so for this one, I'm going to do a row and I'm going to put a space in between them. Like we were doing buttonholes on a placket. So let's do 1 inches, not vertical, sorry, or not horizontal, vertical. There we go. And so then if I could repeat this over and over, I could use this for, like I said, a valance or maybe a shower curtain or a placket for a shirt, if you like to do that sort of thing. And I'm going to say, okay. Now, if we put our placement marks around this, so I'm going to choose my placement mark option. And this one, we're connecting top and bottom. So I'm going to choose those placement marks. And I don't have to choose all of these. I could just do the corner ones, but I really love the center one. This one, the center one wouldn't matter as much because I've got something to line it up with. But the more you have, the more you can just line up. So then I say, okay. Now watch what happens here. So if we're going to do these buttonholes top to bottom, if I copy and paste, if I line up those placement marks here, then my next set of buttonholes don't have that spacing in between them. Okay. So you can move these placement marks around. So let me undo that. And then let's just go back to our single buttonhole right here. And let's do a repeat again. And for this one, I'm going to repeat. Oh, did the wrong one again. I'm going to add a fourth one. And that's going to give me the spacing that I need for my placement marks, okay? And so apply and okay. Now if I add my placement marks here, here, top and bottom, click okay. Now this set of placement marks along the bottom, so it's these last three here in my sequence view. And I'm going to just change those to a different color so it separates them out. So I just right mouse click on a different color so that I can easily select them in my sequence view. And now I'm going to group these together. And then I'm also going to group the ones at the top together. And that's just so I can line them up. Now I can actually select these and I could move those to the top of this particular buttonhole so that it's going to be in the correct spot whenever I'm ready to line it up. Okay. So if I select this one and this one, I'll use my alignment tools just to make sure that they're centered here, just like that. And then I can actually delete this buttonhole. And now let's grab this right here, copy it and paste it, and watch what we get. So now when I line up these placement marks here, and then I zoom out, you can see that now I've got the right space between my buttonholes, okay? And I'm going to rotate this to the side so we can really kind of see it. It'll let me zoom in a little bit more and fill the screen. So just like that, okay? So you're lining up those marks. Those are basting stitches, so then they'll actually come out once you stitch the design. Okay, so now before we go to questions, let me walk through that process that happens at the embroidery machine, because I know it's really confusing seeing on the screen, but once you do this at the machine, it's really simple. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my camera here and let's line this up. Okay, so the way that this works, so I've got one set already stitched. So you're going to hoop and stitch hooping number 1, okay, which is what I've done here. I've stitched the alignment marks and the buttonholes on my faux placket here, okay. And now once I'm done with that, I'll take it out of the hoop And then I just stitch that placement mark there for the next design. Okay, so this is the next design, like you see here. Whoops, there's my top of it there. So, and actually, no, that's my arrow's wrong. So it's this one that I want, just like that. Okay. So here's the top of my design. So this is what we want to stitch next. And I have just stitched that one placement stitch on my stabilizer. And this is a sticky stabilizer so that I can stick my item down to it. And I'm going to use my PAL light. You guys have seen that's what was actually sticking right in front of my camera when we started there. The PAL light is an easy way to get this lined up. And I've got this lined up down to the 0. And then I've also got my marks lined up left or right. So I know that my crosshair is square. Okay. And then now I'm ready to stitch this part of my design, right? So I need this part in my hoop, but where do I place it? Well, you align this mark with this mark. So, and by lining up my light, I can position that right in my hoop all the way down, okay? And then now whenever I take this back to the embroidery machine, this is the next thing that's going to stitch, okay? And so you can see I've got that spacing that I need in between each of my buttonholes. Okay. So this alignment here, I'm aligning this mark that's stitched last with the mark that's on my stabilizer. And that's how I'm going to get that easily lined up. Now, if you've got a machine feature that does all this for you, then by all means, use those machine features. That's why we pay for those fancy things. But if you don't, this will work for any machine out there. Okay, so this is the process of lining it up. If you don't have the PAL 3 light, I know a lot of people do, they'll put like a straight pin in there and use that to line up down below. And then, you know, sometimes people will fold back here to see where to line that up. So you just need to get it lined up. The PAL 3 light just makes it really simple because anytime you illuminate this area, if I put something down on top of it, I can still see the alignment mark, even though I can't see my placement mark underneath. Okay. So that's the process of the multi-hooping. So then at the machine, I would stitch the rest of this design, including that mark at the bottom. And then whenever I take this out of the hoop, I would put on a fresh piece of stabilizer and stitch just that top stitch of the design, just that top placement mark of the design. And then I would be ready to do the next section that's further down my my border area here. So, okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We're going to talk about splitting a design down the center and getting that lined up coming up next. So let's see if we have any questions before we do that. So I will head over to our chat here and see what's going on. So I'm just backing up here, see if we've got any questions. So Laura said, what software am I using? So there's actually numerous dime software that have placement marks in it. So Laura, I'm using a mix of features, but those placement marks in order to do this is actually in quite a few of our dime software. And I'll share that with you in just a bit. The buttonholes are in Perfect Embroidery Pro and in the Hoop Designer. The repeat tool is in actually quite a few of them as well. So, and then Terry said, does this automatically color sort? It does not. It doesn't automatically do anything that you don't tell it to. So I had to actually go and select for it to color sort for me. So that is pretty easy to do. Just one extra click. So, and Joanne said, will there be a replay? Always. And so Joanne, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can rewatch any of our software success. They live out there. You can rewatch them as many times as you like. So really good question. Okay, see what other questions we have down through here. Carolyn Morrow says, how do you get from an art design to stitches? So Carolyn, that's called digitizing. And there are actually software success out there and other videos on our Dime YouTube channel for creating designs from an image or from an artwork. So that's what you want to look for in those past episodes. Also, I'm going to move this out of the way again. It's shining. Also, you can use just for looking up in your user manual. If you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, it'll actually work with the auto digitizer, or you can bring in an image and trace it with your built-in tools like your artwork tool and convert that to stitches. But digitizing is what you're looking for. And I've done some episodes on that, whether it's creating an applique from an image or a design, working with artwork. That's another great one to look for in past episodes as well. So, okay, so I don't see any other questions right away. Yeah, so BB Brigman says, or B Brigman says that it'd be wonderful to be able to make a custom shower curtain. So yeah, that'd be a great use of it. So love that. Or drapes, too. So adding buttonholes for hanging drapes would be another good one. Okay, so now that we've seen that process, let's talk about so those placement marks. Let me go back over here and we'll talk about where they come from. And then we'll talk about what else you can do to split up a design. Okay, so those placement marks are in these programs here. Whoops, let me back up here. Perfect Embroidery Pro, My Quilt Embellisher, the Vintage Embroidery, My Lace Maker, Patch and Applique Maker, Cut and Stitch, or Special FX all have those placement marks. The run stitch option I put here because you could actually create your own custom placement marks if you wanted to. And so really most of the same software that have the run stitch already have the placement marks. But if you have in the Hoop Designer or My Block Piecer, you have the run stitch tool, but you don't have the placement marks. So you could certainly create your own custom placement marks with either of those programs with your run stitch tool, just by marking a little shape and then using that for your alignment purposes. Okay. And then we're going to talk about the split tool next. The split tool is part of Perfect Embroidery Pro, and that's where you can select a design and just with one click, it will split it based on your hoop size. And so it's a really easy way to split up a design. Okay, so I'm going to head back over to the software here and let's see what we can learn next. Okay, so now with the split tool is a little bit different. So I'm going to use a large design, and I actually chose this Merry Christmas design here. So this is actually a Christmas chalkboard design from OESD. You guys know we're part of the OESD family. I am loving being able to use all of their designs, and they always stitch out beautifully. This one is a fairly big design, and I know not everyone has a hoop this large, and so that's why I chose this particular design. And I also chose it because it's not easy to split without some sort of tool, because you've got all of these run stitches that make up the branches. So if you were to miss some of those or something, then you definitely wouldn't have a full design. But basically my guidelines here are an example of where you might want to split. Now, depending on your design, you might be able to select a portion of your design and group that together. So I'm just going to say, let's select this portion here. And, oh, I lost my mark for my, there we go. So I'm going to select this portion here, and I'm going to group it together and select this portion here and group the next one together. Actually, let's hide the one that we've already grouped. Okay. This one here. And then you can see how it didn't select this part right here because it's actually part of this bottom design. So I could select this part here, and let's group that together. And then I'm going to hide that piece there. And let's see what we get. Now, I'm just like seeing if I could select these different parts of the design and ungroup them. So if I select this one, and then I'm going to group that together, And then we're going to hide that. So, and over here in my sequence view, I'm just clicking that eyeball and I am able to hide each individual section. So that's all that's left. And so I'm going to group that together. Okay. So now you can see that I've got 4 different sections that I have selected and grouped individually so that I could possibly stitch this in 4 separate segments. Okay. Now, what I would do with each one of these is I would do those placement marks like we talked about. Now, if you use your placement marks, it's going to put the placement around the entire design. So let's just put all of these because we actually have to split everywhere, right? So do you see how it puts it around the bottom? Okay, so now I'm gonna turn all this back on, and then we're gonna actually go over here and see a different example. So for this example here, I actually would prefer, if I have it, to use my split tool. Okay, so I'm gonna click my split tool icon. This is part of Perfect Embroidery Pro. That's the only software that has this split tool. Okay, and you can see that it allows me to select the hoop that I want to work with. So I've got my 8x8 selected, and it's going to take 4 hoopings. So you can see it says 1 of 1, 2 of the first row, 1 of the second row, and 2 of the second row. Okay, and then if I click the split preview, it shows me that this is what's going to stitch first. And notice in between these 2 red lines here, that's some overlapping area, and it overlaps so that you don't get a hard line. So if I click in this area, you see what parts it's going to stitch. If I click over here, you see what part it's going to stitch, and here what part it's going to stitch. Okay. So now I have this option built into Perfect Embroidery Pro, and it does all the work for me. Now I also get these long black basting stitches. Those are my alignment marks so that I can get that perfectly lined back up whenever I hoop it. Again, it's a basting stitch that I will remove once it all is done. And in an 8x8 hoop, I can hoop this in 4, get this stitched in 4 hoopings, maintaining the original size of almost 13 inches tall. So if I change my hoop size, notice if you own, let's say you have a 5x7 hoop that you're working for. So if I choose my 5x7 hoop, you can see here I've got 3, 6, 9 hoopings. And actually, I don't think I need to do anything in this third one. It doesn't look like there's anything down there. If I do my split preview and click down here, yeah, so I'm really only doing 8 hoopings because there's nothing in this bottom section here. But with a 5x7 hoop, I can still accomplish this size design with that size hoop by using this type of tool. Okay. And so now I'm going to go back and click the split preview, and it'll put it all back again. So here's the other thing that I wanted to point out. So let's choose a bigger hoop that only has, say, 2 hoopings. So let's see here. Okay, so this particular hoop here, I can do it in 2 hoopings, and so it's only going to split across right here. You can move this around. So notice when I get over top of my image, it turns into a little hand. That's telling me that I can move this up or down, and or even left or right if you're using a left and right split. But I could move this. Let's say I don't want it to split across the text. I can move that down, and now my split, I've got a smaller hooping up here, but notice how this kind of is more of a natural break point. And then I would stitch this one here second. So you can force it to kind of split in a different area by moving that around. So when I click the split preview, it goes back so I can actually edit here. So if I move this up and click my split preview again, now it's going to split here. So it's kind of doing the Mary and up, but it's splitting this little ornament here in half, stitching part of it up and part of it down below. But notice how it kept the T of the Christmas and the Y of Mary all together because it's part of this overlapping area. And that margin, that overlap area here is this 1.18 inch that you see here. So this overlapping area, you can actually change that. Say you want a smaller overlapping area. I just dropped it down to 1/2 inch right here. and you can see that it will adjust that overlap area. But the default is, I think, like an inch and something, or maybe just an inch. And so I definitely like a little bit bigger of an overlap, because it did what we saw with that Merry Christmas there. Okay, so once you do that, then when you click split preview, then your save button is activated. And actually, let me go back and split. I'm going to split for my 8x8 hoop again, because that's what I stitched. And so I want you to see it based on how I stitched it. Okay, so I'm going to do split preview. Say this is, I like it how it is. I want to do split preview. It's going to stitch, needs 4 hoopings, and I'm going to save all 4 of these into individual files when I click save. Okay, so when I click save, it'll ask me what I want to name it. I'm just going to put this in my, say, my downloads folder, and call this my split design. And I'm going to save the format for my embroidery machine. So you choose whichever format you're using. And when I click save, it will automatically open up the folder where it's saved. And I'm going to choose my extra large icons, which this is my Perfect Stitch viewer, allowing me to see these images like this. But notice how it's split into 4 individual files. And now my goal is to stitch the first one, line it up with the second one, line it up with the third one, and then the fourth one. And that long stitch that is both horizontal and vertical is what's going to help me line that up. So let's open up. Oh, I didn't even spell design correctly. So on that name. Okay, so let's open these up. I'm going to do file, and let's group this one together. And I'm going to do file and merge, and choose number 2. This is my second row, or my second design in row number 1. And so notice, if I can get those marks lined up, everything's going to line up beautifully. So let's merge the other 2. Whoop, not new. I want to merge. So file, merge. Merge means I'm going to bring it onto my workspace that I'm already using, whereas open is going to open it on a new workspace. Okay. And so here's my design. So let me zoom out here. And here is what I am lining up, just like that. File, merge, and grab the last one and slide this over. You can see that fits right in there. Lining up my black lines is going to get that all lined up. Okay, so now those black lines, remember, those are basting stitch, which will be removed, but they're going to help you piece that design together. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like when it's all done. Now, before we go to our next question, I'll go under my camera and show you what that looks like. It's very similar, but I think it'll make more sense now after seeing the multi-hooping with the placement marks. Okay, so here's my example. So you're going to stitch your first iteration of your design, right? And then you're going to take it out of the hoop, and then you're going to hoop a new piece of adhesive stabilizer. And then color number 1 is actually this line down here, but I stitched both lines so that I could make sure I was square. And that's just a personal preference. You might be fine with that first one here. I'm going to use my Pal Light again. And again, you could use, like if you like to use your straight pins to stick in the corners, whatever works for you. But that red light allows me now to align up, because we're ready to stitch this portion. So this is the part that needs to be in the hoop. Okay, so I line that up with that light. And that is very low. I'm going to just turn off a light here and see if it'll show up a little bit better. That shows up a little bit better. You can see it there. Okay, so I'm going to slide this down, and I'm lining up that stitch mark. Again, that's a basting stitch, so you'll pull that out when you're all done. And now I'm ready to stitch this design here. And I actually created this template so that we could see what it's going to look like stitched out. So here's my marks, those black lines there. And if I just position it right on my design, so you can see how this joins beautifully even down to that little bitty piece right there that's at the end of that branch. Okay. And so then I would stitch this design. Now, my template, because I lined up my marks, I don't necessarily need the template. The template was just to show you what it would look like once it stitches. But you certainly could use the template in this instance too, because it helps you know, where to center that design. And so you could just double check everything. So you could just make sure that it's centered. And then because this design has that line in it, when you advance to check that line to make sure you're lined up, those points here and here on your machine, you know how you can move your design around checking those placement marks? You can certainly do that as well. But the goal is to line up the previously stitched placement marks with the marks that you stitch here. And because this lines up, then the rest of your design is going to stitch in the right location. Okay. And then once you do this, you would take this side of the hoop and you would do the same thing down here. Okay. So you would stitch the placement marks. And in that case, the placement mark would actually be the top and on the right. And so then that would allow you to line up this segment right here. Okay. And then once that's done, you would line up this segment and your placement marks would stitch on the left and then on the top. Okay. So the right and the top here and then on the left to get it all lined up. Okay. So it's actually pretty simple, but I know it's like, you know, it seems complicated, but it's actually not as complicated as you think. It's really just lining up those marks. So using your machine features, you need to make sure that you understand how to, you know, check for that placement. I always like to check those marks before I take that stitch just to verify, and then you'll be good to go. So it really is pretty easy. If you haven't done it, give it a try. Okay, so before we go back over to the software, let's see if we have any other questions here. Let's see. I'm going back here. Just backing up so I can get kind of toward the beginning of any last questions. So, hey, April, thanks for joining. You guys know April. She's part of our education team here. So glad to see her. Just going through looking for questions. Roseanne says, what about splitting a design like a heavy fill stitch design? So that's a good one. I'll show you an example of that one here coming up, Roseanne. And so I'm going to put hopefully if I get back over there, if I forget, make sure to tell me, but the fill stitch was what I wanted to show next. So, and then Linda says, if you're using a jumbo hoop on a multi-hooping multi-needle machine, when you choose that hoop in the drop down, everything is grayed out. So what am I doing wrong? If you are using a jumbo hoop on a multi-needle machine. So the jumbo hoop, if you're talking about, Linda, the 360 by 360, which is a 14 by 14 square. So that hoop is designed for the multi-needle to be used with the placement stickers that come with your machine. So you don't have as many options in the wizard because the machine does the work. Okay. So whenever I go back over there, I'll show you that. That's a really good question. So, PEP software. So, Artist. So the, software that I'm using, PEP has the split tool. And then we use the placement marks, which came from a lot of other tools. So, but yeah, you can watch this, Artist. So don't feel like you've missed anything and can't go back. So, is it in PEP? So I love the Merry Christmas. That's actually an OESD design. So look for Christmas chalkboard Christmas. It's a jumbo chalkboard Christmas design on OESD is the one that I was using there. So that's a great question. And then Terry said, does the split feature actually duplicate stitches where the sections are overlapped? It doesn't duplicate stitches for the design. I mean, every design is going to be different, Terry. I mean, can't always say that every single design, but really what it should do is kind of feather the design so that you don't have a hard line, and fill stitches really are where that would happen. So, and I'll show that when it's going over, but really should not duplicate stitches. If you're having that issue, let me know. And then Marianne says, is that design and pep? Oh, so Marianne answered that. So that's an OESD design. So check that out. So I love, love, love having all of these new fun designs. It really, gets my creative juices flowing, having all these OESD designs at my fingertips. So, and then Linda says, what if you're using the jumbo hoop for, yes, the 14 by 14. So yes, I did understand your question correct, Linda. So that's a great question. So I'll do that when I go back over, because that's actually a really good one. And then what about splitting applique designs? So if you're splitting applique designs, Marie, it will do it. What you're going to do with an applique design is make sure that you cut your applique fabric as large as your whole design, but it basically like will stitch half of it and then you can trim that away, but then the other half doesn't have the placement stitch and the tack down. And then when you rehoop and line that all up and it does the placement, then you would trim away. So just make sure your applique fabric is as large as the entire design. So, but yeah, that's another really good one. Wow, that would be a really good lesson too. So I'll have to remember that. Okay, so let's head back over. And then now that we have seen that split, let me go back to my design where I did the placement marks. So I'm going to close all of these out here so I can actually find something. I don't need to save them because they're already saved. But I'm trying to get back to the whole design. So that's a totally different scenario there. Oh, that's another good one. Pumpkins design. Here we go. Okay, so remember we grouped these 4 sections together? So now if you do not have the split tool, this is something that you could possibly do. It is going to be highly dependent on the design itself and if you can actually select these individual components. Okay, but remember that we said that you can add these placement marks and you could move them. So I'm going to show you how you can use these to move them where you need to. Okay, so on this design, I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to do it on a different one so that you can actually see it in action. But this is what you would do if you needed to use those placement designs. So I have these grouped in 4 separate segments, and then I can put these placement marks around this part of the design in order to stitch it. Okay, so now let's see that somewhere. I'm going to close that one out. I'm looking for another design that I had open, closing my buttonholes, closing my flowers, so I can find something here. There we go. Okay, so this design, for instance, this is another OESD design. This design is 10.5 inches wide. Okay, so if you don't have a hoop that's 10.5 inches wide, you could essentially stitch just these first 2 letters here and these second 2 letters here. Now, if you have the split tool, you can see that when we choose the split, it automatically splits it every letter except this one. It does stitch part of the bow, which is perfectly fine if you've got this tool. It makes it really easy to do. And if we did the split preview and maybe move this up a smidge, we could maybe force it to do, well, it still did part of the bow, but still you're getting one whole letter in each one of these quadrants. Or let's say you are doing a hoop, maybe you've got a 6x10 hoop, even though you don't have a hoop that's 10 inches wide, but maybe you do have a hoop that's long enough that you could do this in 2 hoopings. So I'm going to go to this one here. And actually you can see that it actually says it's going to take 3 hoopings here. But if I move this over just like that, and then click split preview, you can see I have forced it to do the H and the M and the O and the E in 1 hooping. Okay, so then I've got 2 hoopings here, even though it said that I really needed 3, but I was able to do it in those 2. Now I'm going to close this. So that is the split tool. Remember, the split design tool is only in Perfect Embroidery Pro, but we have those placement marks in a lot of different embroidery software. So if you don't have the split tool and you have something like this, or like that Christmas design, you can move those placement marks around. So let's do that. So I'm going to put placement marks all the way around and click OK. And now these placement marks here, the ones that are on the right, I'm going to select each of these. So this one, and that one. I'm going to group those together. And I'm going to select the remaining ones and group those together. And I'm going to move these, and I'm grouping them so that I don't accidentally move one without the other. Okay. So if I move this over here and make sure it's lined up with these, so I'm just going to use my alignment tools like this and take this set here, copy and paste them. And then I'm going to mirror image them. And then you can see, here's my mirror imaged ones on the left, and I'm using my keyboard nudge tools. I'm going to move these really far so you can see that all I did was just create a second set of these, and then I can move those right over and get those lined up. Okay. And this one and this one, that design I want to save separately. So I could either paste it onto a new page and save it separately. So I'm going to cut it and paste it on a new page. Okay. And save this completely separately. Now, I don't need the ones over here on the right. If I'm stitching that second, there's nothing to line it up with. I'm really trying to line up the left and the right, so I can actually just have these. And also, here, I could just have those. I don't necessarily need these on the left either, so I could get rid of those. So I really just want to line up in the center. Okay, so I would stitch these two letters with my placement marks, okay? And then I would take that out of the hoop, and then I'm going to stitch just my placement marks here onto my stabilizer. And that is what I'm going to line up with the marks I've already stitched. And then when I stitch the other part of the design, it'll be lined up. Now, this is a really easy example with the design, easy to split with the HOME. Let me go back here, and I'm going to undo and bring this back. Okay. And so this example here, these two designs, and I can manually place those placement marks. This would also work in the instance of our design here that we manually grouped together. So let me turn all of these back on. And these placement marks, we could move around and actually put them around each one of these segments so that I create my own split design here. Okay, so that's an option if you don't have the split tool. I will tell you this instance here, not every single design is going to work, because if you have a design that is a fill stitch design, let's go in and bring one in. So I'm going to do File and Merge, and then I'm going to go to my OESD designs here and find one that's a fill stitch that we can work with so you guys can see it in action here. So I've got a jumbo butterfly design, I think it's called. So I'm going to just type in jumbo to search. Yep, right there. And then any format, because I can save it out in the format that I need once I save the design. But this design here is almost 12 inches tall, and look at all of those fill stitches. Okay, so if I choose my split tool and split preview, you can see here how it kind of feathers this in. I wish I could zoom in right here, but I can't zoom in this tool. But here you can see that there's some of the fill stitches that stitch here, but not this part here. And the same thing is true here. So look, this yellow area right here, it's got some of the fill stitches of the yellow that's going to stitch in this particular segment, and then the rest are going to stitch in this segment here. Okay, so, and you can see the same thing right around here. So we've got fill stitches that it actually split, and then the remainder will stitch on this side. And you can see how it kind of overlaps into those areas. And again, that's kind of that feathering so that it doesn't overlap. It creates some overlap so you don't get like a hard line. Okay, now let's go back to our hoop choices. So I think it was Linda that asked about the 14-inch jumbo hoop for the multi-needle. Okay, so I'm going to go and choose the multi-needle hoop, the jumbo multi-needle hoop. Now this hoop, the reason that you can't do any of this stuff down here and you can't make any changes, that's because this machine, you actually, the Brother or the Baby Lock machine, this jumbo hoop, you actually stitch this half and then you flip the hoop around. So you don't actually rehoop. You actually hoop your giant piece of fabric in the hoop. You stitch this half up here. And then when you turn the hoop around and stitch this half, the machine will ask you for your placement sticker that looks like the little snowman, and it will actually line up the two halves for you. So if you choose multi-needle hoop, you don't have all of these options. You can't move this around because the machine is actually going to line that up for you. You're not having to do it. You don't have to have placement marks, hoop marks. You don't have to do the overlap set margin because it does everything for you. So just that's the difference with that multi-needle hoop there. So, okay, so let's see what other questions that we have here. So could you clean up the E to remove the bow parts? So you could, so the bow actually stitches over the E and it leaves holes. And so do you mean, can you fill in those holes? Yes, you can with Perfect Embroidery Pro. It has the ability to do that. But the bow is going to cover it up as you stitch it. So you don't really need to fill it in. So, and BB, if I or B Brigman, if I misunderstood that question, just ask again. I'll clarify. So, and then what's the name of this design? So the butterfly design is a jumbo butterfly design, and so it is. Let me look at that for you. But it's another beautiful design. So it is the Jumbo Butterfly Floral. So you can look that design up if you are interested in that. And then we have a question here from, is that Trishanda? So Trishanda, are you using a shortcut to group? Yes, I do. I use my shortcut keys, Trishanda, a lot because it just makes it go quicker. So group and ungroup is Control G and Control U. If you look in your user manual for Perfect Embroidery Pro or any of your programs, we do give you a list of shortcuts as well. So, and then are you allowed to alter purchase designs? Yes, Laura, as long as they're for your use and you're not reselling the design, absolutely, you can alter the designs that you get from OESD. So, and then Joyce says, what's the name of this design? So I think I answered that. It was the Jumbo Butterfly Floral. So I'm glad you guys are liking these designs. They are beautiful. So, and then Linda said, what a great class, useful class. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. So, and then Catherine says, I have a 12x5 hoop on my 5x7. Any help? So I have a 12x5 hoop on my 5x7. Any helps? Catherine, maybe clarify a little bit. I'm not sure I understand what your question is exactly. So if you've got a 5x7 design or a 5x12 design or a 12x5 design and you want to split it for your 5x7, then you would choose your 5x7 hoop for the design and it splits based on the hoop that you have selected. So maybe that answers it. If not, then let me know. It has 3 hooks. Oh, the multi position, I think she's saying. So if I want to change the wreath to another item like a barn or house, oh yes, that's a great option. So if you want to replace the wreath and put a different item there and you want to clean up the design, if you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, you can fill in those holes on there for sure. So that's using like your shape tool to redraw those areas and then do your satin stitch there. So that'd be a really good class. I'll have to put that one down. I love that idea. Okay, so, and then Catherine has the 3 hooks on it. So yes, that's the multi-position hoop. And so you're basically splitting a design, Catherine, for your max sewing fill. So like if that hoop is the 5x12, but your max embroidery filled on your machine is 5x7, you're basically splitting for those that 5x7, and then you reposition your hoop for the alignment. So that's another great question. OESD will OESD include C2S design? So Eileen, that's a great question. I sure hope so. Lots of things are changing and being updated and everything for OESD. So that's definitely something that I hope we can get to. Great question. So all right. So I love that. I think that we've got some good questions here, and I think that that's a lot to process for today. So just a reminder, so the placement marks that I was using are part of all of those programs: PEP, My Quilt Embellisher, Vintage Embroidery, My Lace Maker, PAM, which is Patch and Applique Maker, Cut and Stitch, and the Special FX software. Or you could manually draw some marks with your run stitch tool if you have any of those programs for the run stitch tools but don't have placement marks. And then if you want to split a design with the split tool, that is only part of Perfect Embroidery Pro. So a really powerful feature for you to be able to split. So all right, so in a couple of weeks, I will be back here, and I will talk about embossing and nap blocker. So I'll talk about how you can create custom embossing designs and also create a custom nap blocker shape. If you don't have that feature, maybe you have it in one of your programs, but you don't have the automatic nap blocker. So I'll talk about how to create that. And in that session, another user request was about creating your own motifs. And so hopefully we'll have time and I'll be able to incorporate that in, because it would be a really good spot for that. So in 2 weeks from now, on September the 16th, I will be back. So join me 1 p.m. Central for the next Software Success. And as always, if you saw any of the features that I was using today that you don't have but you would like to have, then certainly you can purchase them from our website. But I always like to recommend supporting your favorite brick and mortar dealer. If we weren't making purchases from our favorite brick and mortar, they would not be in business. And we love to go there and be able to shop in person. So make sure you're supporting your favorite brick and mortar dealer by going and asking for your dime software. If you want to try any of these programs, you can certainly do so right from within Embroidery Toolshed. In the lower right in the purchases area, there's an option to try. You can find that in the user manual if you need to. Certainly, you can also reach out to us for help. So all right, guys. So until we have another Software Success, I'll say bye for now, and thank you guys for joining.